because my next guest just testified before a federal grand jury. He says he was in possession of a trove of digital evidence from Diddy's freak-offs and parties.
Combs' legal team vehemently denied the accusations on his behalf, while the rapper continues to be held in a Brooklyn jail since September, awaiting his May 20th.
Oh my gosh, you won't believe the shocking story I'm about to tell you about Shaw Diddy Combs and his mother Janice. Trust me, this tale goes deeper than you could ever imagine. We're talking family secrets, hidden legacies, and an upbringing that'll make your jaw drop. But here's the real tea that's got everyone buzzing. Word on the street is that the FBI might have Janice in custody. Can you believe it? They're saying she could be connected to some of the very same scandals that have Diddy's name splashed across every headline. Everyone's dying to know, what did Mama Combs know, and did she actually help shape her son's controversial choices? Let me tell you, this story is messy, shocking, and absolutely impossible to look away from.
Well, certainly there's a lot of information that needs to be substantiated, investigated, and those kinds of things. But when we look at people who become offenders, we oftentimes see early exposure to whether that's or actual behavior, and we oftentimes see that within the family.
Honey, we need to rewind this story way back to when little Shaw Combs was just a boy in Mount Vernon, New York, living under the roof of his fierce single mama who was determined to give him the world. Now, Janice wasn't just any mom. She was a former model and teacher's assistant who refused to let life knock her down. After losing her husband Melvin in the early 1970s, she grabbed life by the horns and did everything in her power to shield her baby boy from life's harsh realities. But darling, let me tell you, those protective walls she built, they might not have been as solid as she thought.
You know, that kind of environment growing up in is going to have an impact on a child growing up. Now, it doesn't make excuses for what people do in adulthood, and the form that can take really depends on a lot of different things, including things such as what are the family values? Are the family values about, you know, being open and honest about things, or if there's trauma in a family, do families deal with it, or how is that child raised?
Now get this, according to insiders and a juicy new documentary, that picture-perfect suburban home wasn't exactly what it seemed. Janice, bless her heart, had quite the reputation for throwing these absolutely wild gatherings. And let me tell you, these were not your typical potluck dinners. We're talking guests from the glittering world of high society, mixing with characters straight off the streets of Harlem. While little Shaw was supposedly tucked away in another room, the energy from these parties, oh honey, it left an impression that would last a lifetime.
I think another question that we just can't ignore is the fact is a role of power. Because one question is, you know, how does somebody become the way they are? And then another question is, how are they allowed to stay the way that they are? And I think that also speaks to this kind of, you know, lack of accountability.
You won't believe what Tim Patterson, Shaw's childhood bestie, spilled in that Peacock documentary, Diddy, The Making of a Bad Boy. The tea he served about those parties at Janice's house? Scalding hot. Picture this, people lounging around half-dressed, music blasting through the walls, and an atmosphere that screamed, anything goes. For young Shaw and his friends, this wasn't shocking. It was just another Saturday night. But looking back now, Patterson says these wild times might have blurred some pretty important lines about what's okay and what's not.
So pretty early in the proceedings. I think it's only been about a month or a month and a half since he's been arraigned and held in detention. And so the investigations are always going to be a continuous and ongoing process. I'm sure at this point there's been an exchange of discovery, and not only that, but I think there's been a gag order placed on the attorneys with information that they can and cannot share. But more importantly,
and here's where things get really interesting, darling. Those infamous freak-offs everyone's talking about in the court documents, they're practically carbon copies of those early house parties. I mean, the similarities will give you chills. The same over-the-top excess, the same colorful cast of characters, and those same blurry boundaries. Now, Janice is adamantly denying any influence on her son's adult shenanigans. But honey, when you put these parties side by side, those eyebrows aren't just raising, they're hitting the ceiling.
We're monitoring another push to free Sean Diddy Combs tonight, with his legal team citing new evidence in an updated bail proposal. The music mogul agreeing to around-the-clock security and cutting out contact with basically anyone but his legal team to get out of jail ahead of his trial scheduled for May of next year for charges he allegedly coerced and abused women for years.
But wait, it gets even juicier. Patterson dropped some seriously shocking details about who was coming and going from the Combs household during these parties. We're talking people from all walks of life, glamorous socialites rubbing shoulders with some, let's say, more dangerous characters. And get this, Patterson hinted that sometimes they'd stumble into private rooms and see things that would make your grandmother faint. It paints such a vivid picture of little Shaw exposed to this grown-up world way before his time, a world where rules just didn't exist. Now, let's be fair, Janice was ride or die for her baby boy. She worked her fingers to the bone to put him in private school, even moved them to a safer neighborhood neighborhood to give him better opportunities. But even with all those good intentions, you can't help but wonder about the impact of living this double life. Prep school polished by day, wild party chaos by night. Talk about a recipe for a complicated future.
Then if he does this new, quote, robust bail package, you can avoid and evade. And he is very connected with people that can help him avoid and evade. I'm not saying he will, but I would be surprised if the court grants him a bond. When the federal government wants you detained, you are normally detained, and here it was a very far-reaching situation that he was involved.
Let me spill some more tea about what Sean himself has said in past interviews. He's always going on about how his mama's hustle inspired him, crediting her for teaching him about grinding and never giving up. But then he drops these little bombs that make you go, Like, he once shared how he started seeking attention from women when he was just 4 or 5 years old, talking about sitting on his mom's friends' laps. While he tries to play it off as innocent childhood memories, some people are saying these early experiences might have shaped him in ways nobody expected.
So remember when I said Diddy mother might be the originator of the freak-offs? All right, so apparently tomorrow there's the Peacock is dropping. The Diddy documentary is called Diddy, The Making of a Bad Boy, and the doc gets into Diddy's childhood and his experience growing up in connection to the lawsuit and assault allegations he's currently facing.
But hold on to your seats because this story gets even wilder. As Shaw grew up, he didn't just follow in his mama's footsteps, he supersized them. Just like Janice's home was Grand Central Station for all sorts of characters, Diddy's adult life became synonymous with the most outrageous parties and larger-than-life personalities. He built an entire empire on excess and indulgence, but these new allegations, they're suggesting that what looked like celebration might have actually been something much, much darker.
That's it. If it is privilege, of course they won't. But if it really is what the prosecution says, that has nothing to do with the case, or even worse, it's actually evidence of witness tampering, because we all know the attorney-client privilege, there's a crime fraud exception. You can't use your lawyer to perpetuate a future or continuing fraud or crime. So if the documents are what the government says they are, they're going to get them again. And again, it's just going to be a matter of days, because I don't expect.
Now, about these whispers of Janice's arrest, it's all still pretty hush-hush with nothing officially confirmed. But honey, the speculation alone is enough to make your head spin. Could Mama Combs have known what was really going down at her son's events? Did those wild parties from back in the day accidentally set the stage for the behavior he's being accused of now? These questions have got the rumor mill working overtime.
So there's a few things going on. First is the privilege issue. The judge will decide whether the documents are privileged or not. If they're not, they're going to go to the government. If the documents are not only not privileged, but they're evidence of witness tampering, then a few things can happen, all of which are bad for Sean Diddy Combs. First, of course, he could face obstruction of justice charges in a superseding indictment.
And let me tell you about how Janice is handling all this drama in the public eye. She's been going off, calling these allegations against her son a public lynching and begging everyone to hold their horses until all the facts come out. She'll admit that Shaw isn't perfect and has made some mistakes, but when it comes to those really serious accusations, she's walking that fine line between defending her baby and straight-up denial, leaving everyone reading between the lines. The spotlight is burning bright on Diddy's childhood now, and let me tell you, it's like a tale of two cities. From the outside, you'd see this precious little boy in his Sunday best, going to fancy private school and playing Little League. But scratch that surface just a little bit. Chaos and contradiction, honey. Between Patterson's spilled tea and Diddy's own admissions, we're seeing a kid caught between two completely different worlds. One all proper and full of opportunity, the other just wild and free.
According to the Rolling Stone, the doc features an alleged childhood friend of Puff's, hip-hop producer Tim Dog Patterson. He alleged that Janice, Diddy's mom, would often throw parties at Diddy's childhood home. He says that during the parties, it wasn't uncommon to walk into rooms where adults was having that was just their normal.
The impact of growing up like this, absolutely mind-blowing. You can't help but notice how the themes from his childhood, all that freedom, excess, and those blurred lines, follow him right into his adult life like a shadow. It's like connecting dots from that little boy in Mount Vernon to the mogul who's now sitting in a Brooklyn detention center. And while we're all dying to know if these rumors about Janice's arrest will lead anywhere, just the possibility has everyone's imaginations running wild.
Live, a judge has denied bail for Sean Diddy Combs. Of course, this was the hip-hop mogul's latest bid for freedom as he remains in federal jail for his racketeering and trafficking case.
But darling, this isn't just about Diddy. It's about this whole web of people, this entire system that's now under the microscope. We're not just asking what Diddy did or didn't do anymore. We're asking who helped him, who looked the other way, and who's suddenly finding their voice now that his empire seems to be crumbling. Let me tell you, this isn't your typical fall from grace story about some music mogul. We're talking about relationships and connections that go back decades, from his inner circle to the people now front and center in these lawsuits and criminal investigations. And speaking of his circle, the tea about these people over the years is scalding. From childhood friends to high-powered executives, from love interests to employees who say working for him was pure chaos. Take Tim Patterson, he's painted quite the picture of their early years, but his recent revelations, they've got everyone side-eyeing his role in all this. Was he just watching from the sidelines, or was he actually enabling the very behavior he's now clutching his pearls about? That's what everyone, including those investigators, is trying to figure out.
Not buying it all, Kana. And safety can mean a couple different things. Safety just doesn't mean free from harm of violence. Safety can also too mean emotional and mental dynamics that could occur by Sean Combs reaching out to potential witness to get them to possibly change.
And then there's his staff. Oh my God, the stories from former bodyguards, assistants, and even chefs will make your hair curl. Roger Bonds, this former bodyguard, came forward with some truly shocking claims about Diddy's temper. He says he witnessed physical altercations, including one absolutely horrifying incident with Cassie Ventura where he had to step in. While Bonds is spilling all the tea, others from Diddy's camp are keeping their lips sealed tight. Some say they're scared of retaliation, others whisper that maybe they helped cover things up.
Both sides in the Sean Diddy Combs case have until today to give answers for how the music mogul has been communicating from jail. Combs appearing in court last Friday seeking bail while he awaits trial. He's been held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn since September.
Now, these lawsuits? They paint such a disturbing picture of how Diddy treated the people around him, especially his romantic partners and employees. Cassie Ventura, who was with him for over a decade, opened the floodgates with her lawsuit, and honey, it's been a tsunami ever since. Her claims about manipulation and exploitation, they're being echoed by so many others who've come forward. And when I say many, I mean many. We're talking over 40 civil lawsuits with more likely on the way. Tony Busby, this powerhouse attorney representing many of the accusers, says these allegations show a pattern spanning decades. And get this, it's not just women coming forward, but men too, all saying they were pressured into compromising situations.
This is video of Diddy's family arriving to court for last Friday's hearing. Prosecutors arguing that he misused prison systems in an attempt to tamper with potential witnesses. And they say they have proof Diddy used other inmates' phone cards or used three-way calls with friends to contact associates that prosecutors consider to be a part.
But hold on to your hats because the criminal charges are even more shocking. This indictment includes accusations of conspiracy and coercion that could land him behind bars for a long, long time if he's convicted. The prosecutors are saying his whole business empire was basically a front for manipulation and exploitation. They're particularly interested in these freak-offs, events that some former attendees describe in ways that'll make your skin crawl. According to the allegations, these weren't just wild parties. They were about control, with people allegedly being pressured into participating.
The defense denying these claims and is pushing for his release under strict conditions, including a $50 million bond and 24/7 monitoring at a secured Manhattan apartment. There will be a hearing today where both sides will have a chance to clarify exactly how Combs has been connecting with the world outside his jail cell.
Now here's what's got everyone buzzing. Who else might go down for this? Because honey, Diddy might be the star of this show, but he definitely wasn't running it solo. There are whispers that certain members of his inner circle were actively involved in organizing these gatherings, while others knew exactly what was happening but kept their mouths shut. The full story isn't out yet, but one thing's crystal clear. This was definitely a team effort. If Diddy built his empire on indulgence and power, you better believe he had plenty of help maintaining it. One of the most chilling parts of this whole saga, the stories from people who were drawn into Diddy's world by his charm and influence. Take Kat Pan, a former flame who recently came forward. She shared this absolutely bone-chilling moment when Diddy made this cryptic comment while watching a documentary about another controversial music industry figure. According to Pan, it wasn't until later that she fully understood what he meant, and it left her completely shaken. Her story, like so many others, makes you wonder why people stayed quiet for so long. These lawsuits and criminal charges, they've blown the lid off Diddy's past, but they've also exposed some ugly truths about the entertainment industry as a whole. So many people coming forward are talking about feeling trapped in this system that cared more about power and profit than doing what's right. This isn't just about one bad apple. It's about an industry that's been letting bad behavior slide for far too long. The million-dollar question is, will this finally be the wake-up call that leads to real change, or will it just become another forgotten scandal?
You know, if you say the wrong thing or you complain or you know, I don't know, there's an element where you're just, I guess manipulated in a way to make you feel like, oh, you have to please everyone around you. You can't say anything wrong. You don't want to say a bad thing, or you know, when they're constantly asking, would you like to do and you're like, well, I don't do and they're like, well, why don't you do?
Now, let me tell you what the experts are saying about Diddy's future. And honey, it's not looking good. If these criminal charges stick, we're talking potential life behind bars. But even if he somehow dodges that bullet, his reputation, totally destroyed. Legal analysts are calling this one of the biggest celebrity cases they've ever seen. The sheer number of lawsuits and how serious these allegations are, Unprecedented. Word is, Diddy's legal team might try to settle as many civil cases as they can to keep things quiet, but that strategy could backfire big time. After all, settling looks an awful lot like admitting guilt, and honey, his reputation might be beyond saving at this point. The fallout is hitting everyone who was ever connected to him, former collaborators, business partners, friends. They're all running for the hills. Some are making public statements condemning him, while others are quietly cutting ties. This scandal is like a tornado, touching everyone from his company employees to the celebrities who used to be in his inner circle.
The flight was always going to be a tough argument for the government because obviously Combs voluntarily came to New York. He surrendered his passports through his lawyer. He could have fled after the March raids of his Miami and Los Angeles homes, but he didn't. He has access to 2 private jets. I think it was a tougher argument. I know the government made the argument, but clearly the best argument was the dangerousness and the witness tampering. They had much more evidence.
But here's the million-dollar question. Can Diddy's empire survive this storm? Bad Boy Records, once the hottest label in music, is already losing its shine to newer labels. His other ventures in fashion and media, they're hanging by a thread. These allegations have cast such a dark shadow over his entire brand. And honestly, it might never recover. For someone who lived life king-size, the thought of losing it all must be absolutely devastating. But you know what's really powerful about all this? The incredible courage of the people coming forward to share their stories, risking everything to speak their truth. Their bravery has sparked this huge conversation about power and accountability that goes way beyond just Diddy. Whether he's found guilty or not, their stories have already made waves, forcing the industry to face its own role in letting these kinds of behaviors continue for so long.
Is illustrating is this completely out of control party on a super yacht, including various celebrities, that when you read it, it kind of rings true. I mean, when you read it, it doesn't come off as being something that's completely unbelievable. You have to take into consideration that
as we get closer to the trial, everyone's watching to see what happens next. Will more people step forward? Can Diddy's lawyers find holes in the prosecution's case? And what about all those people who were once part of his inner circle? These questions keep everyone on the edge of their seats, waiting to see how this crazy story ends. The saga of Diddy Combs and his mother Janice has everyone talking and speculating. How much did Mama Combs really know about her son's controversial lifestyle? Did the wild environment of his childhood shape the man he became? The line between celebration and exploitation seems mighty thin, and everyone's got an opinion. What do you think about Janice's alleged involvement? Do you believe Diddy's upbringing set him up for all this drama? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and stay tuned for more juicy celebrity gossip and shocking stories.